All right, let's see if this is working. Looks like audio is working and we're actually here. Yay. Oh my goodness. I didn't know if I was actually going to be here today. We'll see if anybody shows up online. I have no idea because all the issues I had this morning. So, well, ooh, we have another victim. Couple of them. Okay, excellent. All bing bong. Spotlight. Hello, welcome to class. Today I'd wanted to do something special, but I lost the last couple of days because of sign-in issues. And so that's why if you were in my classes this morning, you didn't hear anything from me because I was trying to sign in this morning and still couldn't do it. Let's see if you got emails from me because I think I got through the graduate component of this class. I didn't get through the undergraduates. And so touch base with a number of you related to individualized projects if you're interested in that stuff we can develop. Of course, I didn't get any additional information to you because I was going to get you some research articles, kind of get you in the vein of where I was thinking and kind of point you towards some initial steps for each of those kind of areas where I'm thinking and our thoughts are overlapping. But that being said, broke my phone over the weekend. And whenever I switched out my work laptop a couple weeks back, apparently I had forgotten my new password the last time I had to update that thing because it's been a long time. And so both access points for our one-step verification, I did not have today. So I was just dead in the water. So we'll pick up with standard lessons today. So what we'll do is we talk a little about the survey, data management, those types of things, which we'll get into that more in terms of like the data management, coding, how you handle those in programs. But we'll also talk about some of the other things. We'll talk a little about qualitative. There's a chapter where it talks about field observations, so we'll talk a little about that because that's a good place where you kind of get a little bit of that overlap in terms of qualitative and quantitative, and I'll kind of talk about some of my experiences with that kind of stuff. And so you can see how both sides, if depending on what you're building, can feed in. So it's a lot of fun. Um, First, I'm going to run down the hall, get some water and all that because I've been running. But we're here, and that's the big thing. But I'll be right back. officially a little bit after class, so I'm late now. Excellent. So I'm not the last one in here. Oh, it's horrible. Last one. Thank you for that. Let's see here. Might zoom in a little bit. Let's play with this. And so this is going to be a lesson off the top of my head because I was not expecting the last few days to happen. So we'll see how this goes. So we've been talking about data, surveys, official records, and some of those items already at a few different points in this class. In the textbooks, what it does is it just kind of dives into a little bit more detail related to those types of things for the rest of the chapters in here. And so basically what it starts to do is it moves into, you had survey research is really where they start talking about quantitative. You also get it a little bit on the official numbers side of things where they have chapters that talk about like the UCR, NIBRS, to some degree like the NCBS survey stuff too, because that's the chapter surveys. Qualitative is where you start getting into more descriptive types of things. You're trying to describe whether it's the detail you go into an individual's life or like a lived environment. And so you're trying to understand those types of mechanisms, like sort of like a lived experiential type of thing to some degree. There are a few different ways that it'll break it up in the following chapters. So it'll start breaking up a little bit like the next, once you get past the interviewing, it moves into field observation. We need to realize from that it's basically the same kinds of skill sets, but the role there is less active. So it's one of those things. Some ways you could probably introduce those topics a little bit earlier. I might do that next time. And then from there, it's going to move into, I think it's got a chapter on like agency records and that kind of stuff. But we've already been talking about all of those types of issues. So I'll show you what it means. Then from there, I think the remaining two chapters after that, if I remember how I've got it broken up in here, I think I've got the last two chapters set for exam 4. What I typically do in my classes, because I always run long, I never usually don't make it all the way through everything I want to cover. That last exam, if it's 2-chapter thing, usually what I'll do is I'll make those optional. But this one was, I think I had a midterm in here, right? It's a midterm and final. Okay. That's what I want to talk about today. Okay, that's how scattered. So options. Those of you who got emails, you know what those options are already. The rest of you don't, because I didn't get all those emails out. And so 2 options for you all. And I'll actually, we might even do a little survey on it, do it kind of democratically, so you can actually put the data a little bit too. You guys can see that. Or at least play with it a little bit. In terms of options in here, so we have that midterm exam. We still have a few quizzes left that we can pop in there. We may do that, or might do some in-person stuff where I just ask you guys a question. You can kind of get your guys' response to see if you're building into the processes here for how to analyze things. And so quizzes, we can post those out, or we can do them in class. I'm not such a big stickler on them. Midterm and term paper, I do need to talk about because I'm running behind and we're gonna have time for it because just because stuff like what's been happening today just keeps happening. And so we can do a standard sort of like if this were a standard methods class. I do my in-person classes a little bit differently than my online if you've ever taken them. So those are all really structured. Here I play a little bit. And so that's why you guys get the lectures you do and opportunities for project development. And so we can run it where if you do your standard midterm exam, we'll take the same format as the final, take the same format as midterm, or we can do a presentation and get you guys ready for the undergraduates. The easiest one for you all is undergraduate research day coming up next semester. And so instead of having a final exam, what we do is I'd show you the numbers, the analysis, and kind of carve out some new areas for you to start developing. And then we'll work on basically the presentation side of it. And so instead of having a final exam, 15-minute kind of presentation kind of thing, and I give you a PowerPoint that's already got the templates set up. And so you see how it built out. how those things scaffolded together and get a different picture for what research is than what you get just in the classroom. So the other one is slash presentation in lieu of this. And so midterm, we can adapt that if you guys want the points and that kind of thing. So I can do that pretty quick. It's just with as many of you as there are, you guys are probably a little pressed for time, and that's one of those. It's like I can be a little bit adaptive on that one. So if you guys want a term paper or not, we'll put that one up to a vote. And in terms of which option, I'll put a survey out for you all. And so you guys can pick those, see which option you want, because I like options that you can make the most out. So I know some people aren't really interested in this, or had not a whole bunch of people, but a few people are really slower to get into this kind of stuff. And so if you are interested in that, great. If you're not, it's not necessarily required. That would be something that would be more of your benefit. So this would get you the base knowledge for the class. Let's get you more. And so those are your choices. And we'll build those out a little bit because you got a lot of options here. Just as I was playing with the ideas that I was able to get through yesterday or the day before. Like there are so many different things you guys can cut into. It's amazing. But we need to talk about let's see what else. So that will come out. I would expect I'll probably do that immediately after class because I wanted to get that out yesterday. Where you can have that information and about this. Let's see other house cleaning stuff. Not about it. We'll roll off into conflicts here. So in terms of ways that we handle analyses, data collection, and that kind of stuff. So the big types here, some of them we've already been playing with. That's the secondary. Anytime you say the word secondary data, that's something that's been created for some initial purpose outside of what you're using it for. That would be like your UCR, your NIBRS, your NCVS, your newspapers, your annual budgets for organizations like governmental organizations, things like that. Those are all valid data sources, not necessarily ready to be quantifiable. UCR and NCVS, those are, but like if you were to say your city's budget for the last 5 years, you're trying to figure out the relationship between, let's say it's the fund to police. You want to see if that actually does have an effect, and it's been enough time where you can actually see it in the budgets, places where where I should say government entities move funding away from police, and then you have a little bit of time to see, okay, here are the places that did, different trajectories here, right? But that's going to take someone going to quantify it because they won't necessarily have that ready for you to download and insert into a spreadsheet, that kind of thing. And so there's a chapter in there about agency records, content collection, content analysis. That's basically what it's talking about there is when you stop in all the different places where we can gather data and put it into a way that we can analyze it. Just think about all of the different places where we have official information that can be quantified in some way. You might have a variant. Right? And so you start looking all across all kinds of things. Like here would be another example. And I'll jump off in the observation because he's kind of a little I've talked about this one before. No guy who was studying movies. He was making a link between culture, mass media, and it was 4 movies. I'm trying to remember what facet it was specifically of. But it was related to sexism and the different roles they cast females in across time, across 4 movies. And trying to think what else he tied it to. What are you doing? You're watching a movie and you're typifying the different interactions that are taking place in that movie as it relates to the people who are there. And so you can gather information off, right? Now, it's not going to be as easy or straightforward as like a newspaper where this is obituaries. I'm gathering obituaries because I want to have a measure for deaths versus those we acknowledge in the paper or something like that. Maybe there's something that you want to get into. And so there's all kinds of different reasons why I might dive into somebody's records and analyze. So chapter that's on analysis or agency records, that one kind of goes along with program review and evaluation, because anytime that you're looking at records for your own purpose and kind of identifying proxy measures to be able to analyze the relationships you're trying to measure. It's also the same kind of process that you'll use for analyzing an organization, a program, or anything. Like I said, we use the same method for medicine as what we started out with. And so we follow that process, whether using classical medicine or just statistics and those types of things. You can pull out a lot more information than what's readily available. And so you'll see that as we're developing projects if you want to get into it or in reading the chapter, but that's kind of where that goes. When we're dealing with field observation. And so if you think about, let's say, data, there's a few different ways that we look at it in general, right? In that collection stage, when we're talking about that, an easy way to identify what kind of your data you're dealing with is to what degree are you involved in it, and to what degree are people aware of the fact that you're collecting data, right? Because we talked a little about the Hawthorne effect earlier in the semester, and it's like that can have massive effects. Here, it's sort of like when we're talking about secondary data. That's data that already exists. Somebody measured that for some other purpose. So when we use it, I mean, we have to keep in mind the original purpose for it, but the fact that we went in there and downloaded the UCR numbers for whatever county, no one knows that, right? It's not something that they can see that you went and downloaded it, right? They might be aware of the fact that it was measured. Most people aren't even the fact that those things are measured. If I said the American Community Survey to someone who's not been in this class, are they going to have any idea what I'm talking about? No. If I said census, though, they will. A little bit different there. And so if you think about on one end of the spectrum is this, where it's like you were so far removed that basically your IRB processes, the review processes involved for actually doing this research are rubber stamp. Right? That already exists. So there's no new dangers involved. There's no new issues presented by these analyses, by collecting the data, or anything involved with it, because it's already done. You're just pulling out new information. Other side. Interviews, the qualitative side of things. Interviews are probably the most let's say intrusive, because you think about those. What are you doing? It's not just the fact that one, you're involved in getting the data out. It's you're part of that instrument too. And so that's kind of the lesson in the book is everything from the way you dress to your demeanor, to the language you use, to your intonation, to nodding your damn head, right? It's going to have an effect. And that's not a good thing because we want unbiased information. And so in this kind of middle ground area is where you can put something of field observation. And so, yeah, grief. I almost want to show you a bad movie clip. If we had more time, I would do that. But I got a really good one where it's talking about objectivity and observation. Because it's a really, that's probably the most difficult thing is realizing that as you're looking at stuff, you see what you want to see to some degree. I've done that already, so I won't go into detail on that one. This one's kind of fun because you can go either direction with this. You can go quantitative or qualitative, really, really easy. Why? This one's all about the information you pull from people and inferences, really. If you delve into the qualitative research when we're talking about it's coding or things related to that, basically, the textbook will talk about things like open coding and such. I talk about it in terms of you're identifying themes related to what you're getting from this person as you interview them, you have a series of questions. They're going to give you hopefully long answers. As you read through their answers, you're going to look at it. First time you're going to read it, you're just going to kind of consume it. The second time you read it, okay, what kinds of underlying meanings are here that I missed the first time? Third time I read it, okay, what kinds of things aren't being said that I should be picking up? Fourth time, okay, now that I've looked at those things, what other things haven't I seen that are also in here? What kinds of specific words are being used or things of that nature? And so you go through it multiple times, each time pulling out different themes, different elements of those conversations to compile them. Even when you get to reporting, whenever you report them, it's sort of like how we do with the stat stuff. We use aggregation and report raw, or not raw numbers, but report those numbers in that way to give privacy. With this kind of stuff, what you end up doing is you blur people's stories. So you take common elements across people, you take out the elements which make them identify the real descriptive stuffs, and you start identifying like these common elements here, or you can take the really descriptive stuff across multiple people and weave a story to some. That's a bit more creative. You be real careful with that. That's for advanced qualitative kind of stuff. When you start getting into it, you have to be real careful not to bias it as you're doing. Here, we're just looking. What are we looking at? And so why this is fun is because depending on what we're looking at, you could be on either side of in terms of like numbers or descriptions here, right? You can be on either side. I'll tell you about something we did whenever I was in a couple years in my PhD program. We had a person who was interested in food deserts. You guys ever heard of a food desert before? Ooh. Okay, so depending on where you live, your access to food, healthy foods in particular, not always the greatest, right? If you think about here in town, you have a town about 16,000 people. How many places sell food in general, like anything edible? How many people sell actual food? And how many people, or say people, same people, same businesses, how many businesses sell things that can actually sustain your life, right? Like Burger King sells food, don't live on, right? The gas station sells food, also don't live on that, right? And so if you start looking at where your points for food are, where your points for resources, crime, or where your points for problems are, see this separation of things going on. And so the first thing we wanted to look at, this was Little Rock, was okay, what food sources are where. So we already have your general ideas. Like, we know in terms of this city, your major grocery stores are going to be like, two in this district, one over here, a whole bunch over here. And the interesting thing was public transit, because we're trying to build in public transit. It's like public transit only ran east to west, and everything was biased north to south. So it's like the people in the most poor areas have no way to get to where they can actually get food, right? And so that was the kind of argument we're trying to do. It's a health thing. We're trying to deal with city problems. So the first is identify how bad is this problem. And so if we're trying to figure that out, well, we've got a classroom full of people. Okay, here's a list of every business in the city. Every single business. The ones that have food licenses. Okay, here's your section. But you will go and visit every single one of these. When you're there, I'm going to create a survey. Right, and so when you read this, it'll talk about over here, you have the interview schedule, you have your surveys. Otherwise, collecting data here, but surveys are real common for collecting it. And then here, it's like you set up the same kind of network, same kind of template where you're collecting the information. Since we were dealing with food, it was okay. Kinds of things to eat. There's already a structure there. Okay, so here are your basic food groups. Here's which of these items do they have available, right? Okay. So if we were interested in food and trying to figure that out and how little or how much access people have to it, what kinds of things do you want to know about their food? Let's hold on for a second. I said food groups. Where's that? Much better. So groups or types of food, right? This one's meat, dairy, starch. Okay. So what types of foods are available? Is there anything else you want to know about foods if you're going to eat them?
The prices.
That's a really big one. Okay. What else? So here's where you start getting a little bit of the qualitative side of things. You're basing this off of what you see. We're looking at food. Price is pretty easy to fix. It's standardized. Somewhere like $1 is $1. Right? It doesn't always buy the same thing, but it's still just $1. Is it fresh, edible, whatever? Right? You're dealing with produce, bananas, right? Are these green or are they black? Where are they at in this range? How are we going to market that? Right? Maybe we just use words. Maybe we create a scale. Something like that. So you have that inner code of reliability to some degree is going to come in here. But that element of it, of trying to create a structure to something that you just see. Elements of this, something a little easier to see. And then you actually have the stuff that you're observing. How many times do you see it? Very easy to quantify, right? So that's just adding these things up as you go. Maybe you guys a quick idea about what that one. Really, really interesting. So we had major food groups there in terms of your foods, and we had a list of a few of your common in the produce, it'd be say stuff like that. And so we could kind of chart, a space for amount, freshness. Let's see what else was there. Date. Right? Some of those things have dates affixed. And so as you deal with the topic and what you're dealing with, some of those things are pretty easy to learn. What was really interesting about this one was when we started getting into it, of course, the food deserts that they were talking about in the literature at the time. Yeah, we were finding those, that there are big areas where there's no real food available. The only places people want to get food are gas stations. What was really cool to see is the relationship between freshness, money, kind of thing, and access. The worst one I saw, I think I was the one who found the worst one. I found a gas station that's in one of the rougher areas. Food there had expired over a year before, and we're talking bacon. Had a big thing of bacon. It's like, this is from the wrong year. They freaked out whenever they saw me going up the clipboard, though. So that was gone the next time I went in. But it's like, that's kind of stuff you start getting into. You have to go in and watch. I'll tell you about another one. This one was on alcoholism. Did field observations. It was people going into liquor stores. And so if you stop and you think about all the different things that you can see and all the information you can pull from it, that's really what's key there. It's like with that situation, you're dealing with one business type going in. And so as you turn up that level of resolution and what you're looking at, it's like, okay, what do you have there? You've got what kinds of cars are going in the parking lot? What are the people cooking? What do the people look like? Getting what the cars look like? Getting in and out, moving. How is it that they're moving? Do they look, their movements, their behaviors, their dress, their appearance, demeanor. They engage with other people. that kind of thing. And those are all things you can start to typify and quantify. And as you start to do that, just in identifying those types of things, it's sort of like first impressions. They're not always the most accurate, but they are very, very useful sometimes, right? You can pull a lot of information off of that. And as you stack those things up together, that's where you start getting powerful. Let's see what this thing says about. Because I don't remember what it says. Done it. Oh, that's the wrong class. Let's see. That's going to be down here. That's evaluation research. Boop, boop, boop. That's agency records. We'll talk about those more as we get into it for those of you who do that. Field observation. Yeah. Okay. And so since this is you involved in a natural setting, that's the big issue with bias. Here it mentions, what is it? Physical, social settings, behaviors, and events, because you're directly in qualitative ones. I've already talked about that. Creative research, interviews, sampling techniques. Yeah, I tried to talk about sampling a little bit. That when we talk about field observations, notes, and those types of things. Okay. So probably the most interesting thing about this, as you're doing this, it's sort of like whenever you're doing whether you're over on the quantitative side with numbers, or you're in the field observation, or if you're in the qualitative side with those descriptions. As you're doing this, you have to be able to keep multiple thoughts going on in your head at one time. You guys kind of gotten that already as we're talking about things. Sentences go on long and longer time. As you're doing this, you're literally doing about usually it's about 3 steps at any one time. Like you have, we'll say, base data, something like that, right? You have whatever it is you're dealing with. If you're dealing with an actual interview at the time, you're doing an interview or you're doing field observations, realize that you are alive in the moment, right? And so you're doing field observations, so if you have a schedule or an interview schedule there, so you've got some structure there. As you're completing that, usually you're keeping some form of notes. This will talk about field notes. This will talk about, let's see, coding notes and other notes too. And so as you're dealing with this, you have, think about sort of like levels of analysis. So this is base level. This will go into a little bit higher detail, provide information that you might not be read or be key to collect, but it's going to be useful. As you're taking notes on this stuff in the moment, whenever you get out of that interview, first thing that you do, you go and you write notes. You go and you write basically a recap of the thing. So you've got your notes from the meeting itself, the notes from afterwards. And so that way you can go back and start comparing those and pulling out the information. Same thing here, right? As you're dealing with that stuff that you're going in to observe, like you're taking notes about those observations. It's not just the fact that you're from the health on the food deserts. It's not just the fact that the bananas are green or black, right? So you got that huge range there. You start to, okay, so what does that look like? Are we starting to see, is it all of these things are like brand new, fresh and green? All of them are rotten, or is it some kind of a mix here? Are we looking at it's like, yeah, it's like 50% of it looks good, 20% of it looks like it's completely inedible, or is it something else? So those notes become more and more important as you go, because that's going to be additional information, always to tie back in with your base level data to see how it grows. As you start analyzing, it keeps growing. And let's see what else was I going to say. Talked about that. Ooh, with this one, depending on, same thing for interviews too. Depending on the exact format, the more fidelity, I guess you could say, you can get with your data, the better. So if you can actually record, like your interviews, or if you're doing field observations, you're wearing a camera that picks up audio, those types of things. Much, much more rigorous, much stronger, much better, verifiable. Much, much better way of doing that. Yeah, here it mentions unstructured field notes. Field notes, combined structure, flexibility, and notes. Is there anything in here? Revising prior conclusions. Yeah, this just kind of tell you the stuff that we've been talking about related to qualitative. Okay, so here's where it starts talking about it. So technically an ethnography is a qualitative type of research. This is why it overlaps. Participant to observer, right? So that's the interesting thing with this one. So if you're doing the qualitative, like as they presented an interview, always an interview. They're always going to have some idea because you're asking questions. This one, they may know that you're there, they may not. And so they break that up into 3 categories. Right? Are you a full participant, a full observer, or it says complete here, or one where it's both participant, observer. Here, I think it says, let's say participant as observer here. It's literally a term though, where let's say participant, observer. You can be 1, you can be 2, or you can be 3, and both. And so your approach is going to be dictated a little bit by the nature of the thing that you're studying, right? If you're studying a closed group, this is going to be involved participation, right? It's a public group. You can slide right in there real quick. I did that for some Alcoholics Anonymous stuff, right? Don't have to have any impact in there whatsoever. You can just be a fly on the wall. They'll pay attention to you about as much too. It's a closed group though. They're going to know that you're there. So you're going participant, you want deceptions, and then what other types of ethics are involved, right? So in our field, it's like, okay, you're going to be exposed to criminal activities, danger, all of those kinds of things. Observer. Ooh. You've heard the phrase going native. We talked about that in here before. You ever heard that phrase before? Thank you, blank look like you hadn't heard that before. It used to come up more often in I remember what time frame it was. Like I don't want to say it's the 90s. They had some movies where they talk about going native or something like that. Basically what happens is, okay, so it can happen in the interviewing stuff too. It can happen over here in field observation. Basically, as you move into these environments, there's that natural reciprocity between you and the environment. Really hard to keep that from having an influence. And there's plenty of times where the opportunities that are in front of you in that research might be more ideal than life itself as wherever it is going. Good example. Here's one that's always on my mind. Think about those who study Amazonian tribes, right? You're living a life like this, high pace, running all the time, all the time, all the time. You go and you study this indigenous tribe from wherever, and their life's real slow. All they really care about is, hey, I got food, I got water, and somewhere to sleep. I'm good. Okay. Ooh. That might be something that starts to bias that purchasing impulse in that way. Next thing you know, boom, they've gone native. That's literally where that phrase came from. Native. that life was better for them than the one that they were doing. Not a good thing. You lose out on that. Common tendency. Here it mentions about the police. Yeah. In terms of police, you start to identify. It's one of those things that's underlying theme there, being able to separate yourself out, being unbiased, is not an easy thing for people to do. And so, for that, I almost want to talk about, what was it, Florence Nightingale effect? It's like even in negative situations, like captors, you start to take their point of view because it's a survival type of thing, and so realize you're actually fighting with that kind of a force internally there. It's crazy. All right, and so here's where it talks about complete observer, and that's you're not involved at all. It is very, very hard to be a complete observer. To give you an idea, I'll use the AA one because that's one where it's an AA meetings. I also study alcoholism in general. We're looking at liquor stores. It's like, okay, so I think that it'd be pretty easy to keep an eye on a liquor store without having somebody notice you, right? Right? I think that'd be pretty easy. Okay. Go to a rough area and post outside a liquor store and see how long it takes before they notice you. Right. On the flip side of that, would be like talking about, I don't know if Oklahoma ever had it. Do you guys have any dry counties in this state? Arkansas has some counties where it's like they don't sell alcohol whatsoever. A few years back, they started changing that. Big thing that changed. Liquor store robberies. Before they had zero, right? And so that's when you start running into some of these dangerous areas. It's like not only are you dealing with problems there, your ability to conduct research, they'll actually be more attentive. I got identified, and I wasn't even in their parking lot. That's how bad it is, right? Because it was rough. Yeah, started watching police that call that kind of thing. So I was casing the place, getting ready to rob it or something. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna rob the place. That's. But anyhow, it's like that's the kind of thing that you can have happen. Okay, reactivity. Subjects not affected by the role as observer. That's ideal, but sometimes they are. Let's see. Selecting cases, places for observation. Basically, what you're trying to do is you want to balance control with opportunity. You're not going to have in field research. You have less control over anything than with the interviews. That's probably the other way to look at it. So if you look at it in terms of control, this one you have the most control. You're dealing with hard data, quantifying it, those types of things. So you have even control over the system with which you set the responses. On the interviewing side, it's like you have questions you can ask, but things can develop naturally. Here, depending on your role, you've got maybe no influence at all. Okay. Here's where it's going to start talking about purposive sampling. Yeah. So typically what you start doing is you start looking at the physical dimension right here. Wherever you're looking at people, you're dealing with group stuff, wherever they aggregate, or you're doing quite literally physical location. And so because of that, you'll have all the stuff associated sampling. Okay. Here's where it talks a little bit about observations, recording them. Mentions everything from field observations with notes, pen, paper, to videos and all that kind of stuff. Like I said, these things will always stack out. So it'll be one of those things. You'll have your base level data, you have your notes while you're in the interview, while you're doing your observations. You'll have your notes after the fact. Then you have your notes about your notes and about the overlap. And so it's one of those things it'll scaffold out, almost like I reference table of contents pretty frequently because that's what it kind of does. All right, still graphs, field notes. And here's what it talks. 3 guidelines. Don't trust memory. Take notes in stages. Sketchy notes. Rewrite with more details soon after. Record as much as possible. And then here's where they start to do the fun stuff. So here's where you can actually start to verify things. And so between your qualitative and your quantitative approaches, it's actually the best method is a mixed methods approach, because in doing so, what you get is you get all the strengths of the numbers plus all the strengths of validity, right? And so you can balance those things out. That's why it's commonly brought in for like grounded theories and theory development. Here you can use it in that way, or you can use it for, like it mentions here, audits. The subsequent chapter goes into agency and program evaluations. So on one side, you have what we gather, what we're looking at, different ways of getting it, whether it's in the field or whether it's something already quantified. And is there anything else in here? Same kind of stuff. They go over the same kinds of information. So validity, strength, reliability, weak, generalizability, weak. Here it's flexible. But yeah, it's the same kinds of information as before. Reliability. Information back. But ideally, what you want to do is you want to have a mixed methods approach if you really get into this kind of stuff, because one, if you start on the qualitative side, realize that you can quantify some of those things, particularly here, pretty easily. It's a little harder to move this way, but in both, you get both strengths. You can make those links across whether it's organizations, whether it's concepts, and you can actually see whether or not things are moving in the appropriate directions. And so, all right. So we cut after a survey, yeah. Anything else? Validity, reliability, generalizability. Nope, just that kind of stuff. All right, so that takes care of that chapter. And I think here's where it starts moving into the next one. Evaluation and problem analysis. Okay. And so when you get into this, it's the same methodological process as before. It just starts a little bit earlier. Right? And so this one's more related to purpose. So we've got quantitative to qualitative. Realize there's that whole range in the middle. And then you have your purposes, right? So if we're doing research just for the purpose of doing research, great. When you get out of the academic environment, we don't do research just to do the purpose of research. Ideally, it has to do something with this, the whole application side of things. Is it applied? What you will get from reading this chapter is the general idea that most organizations do not do this well. It's the case. That'd be like me. How many of you have heard the phrase mission statement? Mm-hmm. Okay. Was that only in higher education, or was that outside of higher education? Don't know. Just know you've heard it.
Yeah, I've seen it on like websites.
Okay, cool. Mm-hmm. So if you actually hear people get into conversations about stuff, that's what's kind of curious about this. It comes up. Here, I've heard people have conversations about in other organizations, like it'll come up, but usually it's more of a cursory type of thing. Usually it's kind of jargon. Right? It doesn't really mean anything. It's just kind of an idea for what we're doing. What it is you start looking at things like your mission statement, your values, and all that. What that does is that's almost like the same as a qualitative write-up on what the organization does. Here are the elements that we're focusing in on. Here's how we're going to do it. That kind of stuff. If you're doing it right, your mission statement, your values, your goals, all those things align. You can not just make them aligned, you can actually see how you're advancing those things, right? Most organizations do not do that. What you usually get is the very, very lofty, pretty words of a mission statement or any of those types of things. May or may not be attached to anything at all. So that's going to be the first thing that you have to do if you ever get program evaluation or problem analysis, is identifying, okay, what are our actual goals here? Because you might not be able to tell. Right, so think about food bank. Your mission, your goals are going to be related to feeding the hungry. It's like, okay, what does that mean? Does that mean just providing information on how to get food? Does that mean acting as a, what would you say? I don't want to say funnel, like a grant pass-through agency? Is that something where they're actually doing something about it? Is it something that they're actually moving the food, or is it just lofty words? Right? Sometimes it's just the lofty words, and if they're wanting to evaluate it, you got to build everything else out from there, basically from the ground floor. So we'll talk a little bit more about that next time. And we'll get into some more of the project stuff. But I'm just glad I have access to a computer. All right, with that, you guys have any questions? No? Thanksgiving. Yes, Thanksgiving coming up. So I will see you all on Monday. That wasn't a question. I should be seeing y'all on Monday, right? Okay, okay, good, good, good. All right.
I have a question, Dr. Hurst.
Yeah, what's up?
Did you say at the beginning of class, are you going to send us like an email asking what you're wanting to do as far as towards the end of the semester? Or I'm just kind of confused on what to expect as far as assignments and things.
Yeah, so two things are gonna happen. So in the next, I'd say a few hours, I'll get emails out to the rest of you. I only got about half of you through before I start running into this issue. And so you'll get that, and then I'll put out a survey out in Blackboard and let you guys play with that, and let you basically choose your destiny, whether you want to go with a standard midterm or a presentation to kind of fit with building out research if that's what you want to do. Cool.
Okay, thank you.
Pleasure. Talk to you later. Have a good one.